Hello mouses! Welcome back to another episode where we're applying the law to some films. Today it's part 2 of our discussion of Batman Begins, and we're going to focus on his utility belt and the items therein. Okay, let's start with an assurance that the utility belt in and of itself is actually legal. Lots of people wear utility belts, like plumbers, builders, sound engineers on film locations, basically anyone who needs to carry a lot of things but doesn't have enough hands free. Stick around the belt, so basically a belt with pouches on it is perfectly fine to have. The problem that Batman's going to have is what he keeps in it. So let's have a look at the individual items. First of all, he keeps his Batarangs in his utility belt, and as we've already covered in part 1, the Batarang will be classed as an offensive weapon. So keeping it in your utility belt, or even attached to it but under your cloak, will be considered as concealing weapons. So that's 2 offences for the price of 1. But then comes along the grappling hook. Now, the grappling hook is attached to his utility belt, not technically part of it, but it's there, so we're going to cover it today as well. Starting with the fact that it's pretty much an offensive weapon again, and it's on his utility belt, concealed under his cloak, so it's a concealed offensive weapon. Why is it an offensive weapon? Well, for a start, it's gas-powered. You fire it at someone, it's going to hurt. The use of the grappling hook will unfortunately bring Batman into the realm of trespass and damage to property. Damage to property is a simple one. If he fires the grappling hook, it attaches to things with little prongs. So it's going to cause damage when it attaches, it's going to cause damage when it gets pulled back off. Sometimes he fires it through windows and things like that. That's going to cause it to either to A, smash the window, or B, when he's attaching it, to catch onto the windowsill with its little prongs. It's going to leave marks, it's going to rip things, it's basically going to be quite damaging. So he's going to have property damage, both public property and private property. At one point he attaches himself to a monorail. That's damage to public property, so he's liable either way. Any damage that comes about from his use of a grappling hook, or that isn't too distantly attached to his use of the grappling hook. For example, if he fires it at the monorail and then gets pulled across and he knocks a lamppost down at the same time and damages his leg, or when he fires it, it goes past someone quickly and causes them to drop items that then smash, that kind of thing, he's going to be liable for those damages, on top of any damage that he causes himself. Why is this? Well, Section 1 of the Criminal Damage Act 1971 specifically makes this an offence. So there you go. Reckless or intentional destruction of public or private property without lawful excuse is an offence. Furthermore, if the police want to be really annoying, they can also get him on Section 3 of the Criminal Damage Act 1971, which states that carrying a weapon that can be used for public or private property damage without lawful excuse, whether recklessly or intentionally, is also an offence. And let's face it, they're always saying the policy is to arrest the Batman on sight, so if he ever is caught, they're going to throw everything at him, so he's going to get this as well. But let's just put aside the fact that he's damaging property and look at what he's damaging property for. Well, he uses a grappling hook to enter a private residence when he confronts a scarecrow, and into a public building when he goes to speak to Lieutenant Gordon. He uses it to get up to near the roof and then get in through a window. That's trespass. Specifically trespass to land rather than property or person, but trespass nevertheless. And unfortunately, because trespass to land can be so closely linked to breaking and entering, any device that can be used to facilitate trespass to land may also be used to commit burglary or to break and enter. Therefore, if the police find him with the grappling hook, they're going to assume that this is a tool that can be used for breaking and entering. So he's going to get charged with an inchoate offence. Inchoate being an offence that has not yet been completed. And specifically, they're going to say, you've got tools here for burglary, you're dressed up so that we can't recognise you. Basically, you're in a disguise and you're going to go and burgle someone. So they'll arrest him for that inchoate offence of burglary. And that grappling hook will be evidence of the tools he's going to use to get inside. So Batman's not looking good there. And unfortunately, it's only going to get worse for him, because next up comes his listening equipment, which he uses to listen in on mob bosses. Now, listening equipment on its own is not specifically legislated against. Surveillance in the UK is an interesting one, where the courts take the view that if you're doing something in public, you can't complain about being seen doing that something in public. So, someone recording you on CCTV or a video camera in their telephone is perfectly fine. If you're actually in a public place, say you're in the street, or you're in a park, or you're on a bus. And I'm thinking here specifically about that video that was on YouTube and was quite all the rage not long ago, of a racist woman giving a tirade of abuse to a man on a bus. And that's perfectly fine to film that, because you're in the public and you're doing something in public, so you can be seen. So, as long as Batman is using his surveillance equipment to spy on someone who's actually speaking in public, he's alright. But he wasn't. He used it to listen in on a conversation that was going on inside a private dwelling. And this is where he gets a bit of a problem. Because Section 1 of the Protection from Harassment Act 1997, which is an act that was specifically set up to deal with stalking, but has been used for more general harassment, such as racist abuse and things like that, states that any action that could be considered by a reasonable person to be harassing is an offence under this act. So Batman is listening in outside someone's house. That's pretty harassing. That's tantamount to stalking, isn't it? Well, no, because it's Batman. And this is where the law gets interesting. Because Section 1(3)(a) of the Protection from Harassment Act 1997 specifically gives us a get-out clause. Because this part of the Act prevents anyone being charged with harassment if they are doing what would otherwise be harassment for the purposes of either preventing or detecting crime. So Batman sitting outside a mob boss's house using his electronic ear to listen in is alright. Excellent. Or is it? The biggest problem that Batman's going to face here is that although the 1997 Act allows the detection of crime through use of surveillance, the Human Rights Act of 1998 doesn't. The Human Rights Act 1998 was used to bring in the majority of the articles of the European Convention on Human Rights into English law. Now, Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights requires a respect for privacy of private and family life, the home, and correspondence. Well, correspondence is going to cover the conversation that Batman is listening in on. The home covers the dwelling that Batman was listening in on, because it was a private dwelling, it was the mob boss's house. And respect for privacy and private life covers the mob boss's doings. So, unfortunately, even though the fact is that the mob boss was discussing criminal activities, he may actually find that he's got a case against Batman under the Human Rights Act, which is unfortunate. Because the Human Rights Act, although it can't say, oh, the Protection from Harassment Act's little get-out clause here can't be used, it can give a grounds for appeal against a ruling on the Protection from Harassment Act. Basically, the Human Rights Act can't say, that's against the Human Rights Act, you can't apply that law. What it actually does is say, you've got to apply that law, but you have to allow an appeal to a higher court who can deal with the fact that these two laws don't work together. And that can go all the way up the chain of courts, from county court to higher court to the House of Lords, all the way to the European Court on Human Rights. So Batman, if he is prosecuted by the mob boss under the harassment legislation or human rights, will find that he eventually ends up in Strasbourg pleading his own case and taking up all of his crime-fighting time trying to deal with one specific lawsuit. So that's not really a good use of his time, so let's just hope that Batman doesn't get caught. And that's really it for today. That's going through Batman's utility belt. The law isn't really on Batman's side on this one, which is unfortunate because a lot of the time all he's doing is basically trying to prevent crime, which is certainly something that I would respect. But never mind, perhaps on the next episode he'll have a bit more luck. And until then, I've been Kirk-Robinson. You've been listening to me rant about the law and Batman for a while. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you tomorrow.